Hi folks, thanks for joining us for another episode of Malden Talks. And my name is Brian DeLacey, and we're guest hosting tonight on behalf of Malden News Network. And we have a great session on to look at Roosevelt Park and what might happen at that park in terms of various proposals that have been put forward for improvement. So tonight we have got a studio audience actually, which you can't see quite yet, but you will eventually. And we've also got two great guest speakers. So to my left is Kathy Sullivan and Kari Percival, and they're going to spend probably about 10 minutes or so to address some of the environmental and economic kinds of issues related to that space. They have tremendous knowledge of the science as well as the community. And then after that, we're going to switch to a couple of other folks who are in the studio audience right now, coming at it from more of a parental perspective. And what the impact of changes might be there and how it's used. So, Kathy and Kari, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks
For setting this up. So maybe you could talk a little bit about yourself and your own background and what your interest is. And for the benefit of the viewers, the intent is to have sort of a broad discussion about this, but you're coming at it with a certain perspective, right? So maybe you could talk about how you got involved and what your interest in.
So I am a teacher at the Sullivan School. I've been there for almost 15 years and also a lifelong resident of Malden. My purpose in this subject is the students at the Sullivan and making sure that they continue to have the opportunity to go out for recess and enjoy running on grass. Switching this over to an artificial turf field would truly be detrimental to the kids who often don't have the opportunity to run on grass or to be on a surface that is not tar or concrete. Just today, looking around out there, recess runs for about 20 minutes for each grade level. So over 3 hours, we have anywhere from 1,200 to 1,400 kids at the school.
Wow.
And there are 300 kids running around that field at a time as the recess switches off. So taking away that opportunity for them is not the right thing. Not the right thing.
So you've been kind of involved in this for some time.
10 years.
10 years. So for 10 years, the city basically has been trying to come up with a plan to come up with improvements for Roosevelt Park. So that's the good news. But the current plan, which is to improve it with artificial turf, synthetic turf, what is not to your liking?
Well, obviously the artificial turf is not to my liking, but what is not truly to my liking is the fact that this never included the school. Never were informed, there was no outreach. What the students might want was never a consideration. This plan was done outside of the purview of anybody in not only the school community but the neighborhood. And so the students at the Sullivan School would love to have a basketball court. That's not in the plan. We also would need another playground. We have K2 uses the current playground, and there are 15 classrooms. We could use a handicap accessible playground because we do have a large population of handicapped children, disabled children, and we don't have that opportunity right now. So it's beyond just the artificial turf and the environmental impact of that. It's because there was no outreach. The Sullivan School and the surrounding community is considered an environmental justice community. And so when we talk about that, we're talking about a community of people that are, it usually has to do with English not being the first language. So the outreach should be done in various languages to reach those people. Talking about people who are socially and economically disadvantaged. And so there are current policies at the state and the federal level, the EPA, that there are environmental justice policies. And none of these protocols were followed at all throughout this process.
That's a lot.
So,
That's a lot.
It's wrong.
Yeah. Kari, how about you? What?
Well, I moved to Malden just about 10 years ago when my husband and I went to start a family here, and we thought it'd be a great place to raise kids. we heard that it was a great place to raise kids. We loved the schools here. And that year when we moved here 10 years ago was when I heard about a plan where the charter school was going to kind of take over the Roosevelt field from Miss Elmwood's school and lease it and put the artificial turf in. I was concerned about that, and I was glad that that very unjust situation didn't go forward. But now that a plan to remove the actual living grass from the Elmwood schoolyard, it just seems like it's not a good choice, and that we could do much better than that.
So, and one of the things, as I recall, that you had done, maybe with one of your, the child was, you went out and you sort of measured the temperature in different settings. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that and just what's living versus what's not.
Sure. Well, I live right near the Elmwood. I'm in the neighborhood of it, and that's the closest field where I run around with my kids and play. I also should tell you, I'm a former middle school teacher of science, so I taught science. I decided to find out, well, how hot is the field? Is it just my imagination? Is the field, is a turf field, how much hotter is it than a natural living grass field? So I just took my middle school teaching thermometer out there, and it was a nice 70-degree day, 11 a.m. in the morning, lovely springy day, and I tested it on the turf. I just laid it on the turf for 2 minutes, and I just saw the red just go straight up from 70 up to 100 degrees in 2 minutes. And
so there's a big difference at the surface level of the temperature, and for kids to be playing on that, particularly smaller kids who are closer to the surface, I suppose, it might be noticeable.
Yeah, and I even was shocked that how much higher it is even than asphalt. I went and I put it in the shade to bring it back to neutral, and it was 70 degrees in the shade. It went back down to 70, and then I put it on the real live grass. It went up to 80, so it went up 10 degrees in the sun on real grass. Then I put it on the asphalt after I cooled it off in between in the shade, it's just science. So anecdotal observations, but using a tool. So when I put it on the asphalt, it went up to 90. But still, I had done the turf first, and it went up to 100. So people think, oh, it's green, looks like grass, you can run on it, great. But there are a lot of
hotter than asphalt is what it comes down
yeah.
to. Yeah. So okay, so you both had real long-standing concerns about this, and you both come at it from a scientific, reason perspective, and you've stuck with it. And maybe you talk a little bit more about the process. Now, in the past, you've both been involved. There have been some community meetings, right? There was one at the Salem Wood in the cafeteria where the proposal was presented. Maybe you talk a little bit about the context of how this project came about. Kathy, maybe you start.
Well, I heard about it, or I read it in the paper, or I might have seen it on Facebook or something, in March, that there was another plan to renovate the Roosevelt field, and then learned that it once again was the same plan, basically, that they had put in place 10 years ago, and tried a few times to gather the money together to do it. Same thing, tear up the 3.5 acres and create an artificial turf sports complex. It was not ever intended to be a community park. It was for the sole purpose to meet the needs of the sports leagues, which I believe are Malden Youth Soccer, the women's and the girls softball, Pop Warner, those particular ones, I think. So there were some community meetings by the Community Preservation Committee that we did attend, but at that point it seemed as though they really weren't looking for community input. The plan was in place, they had approved the plan as is, and they were promoting it as is. And They really weren't looking for any input at that point.
Mhm.
We continued to pressure the community preservation, the applicants, which were the Malden Redevelopment, Council Murphy, I believe the mayor,
Mhm.
and they finally agreed to have a community meeting. However, it wasn't very well advertised. There were no Connect Ed messages that went out to parents, no
Mhm.
notices, very few notices on social media, just a few signs around.
I do recall that now, that actually the meeting wasn't scheduled until some people actually raised concerns. But,
Right.
and I see Kari, you kind of shaking your head as well there on that, in terms of the way the community meeting came about.
Yeah, I heard about the meeting, so I attended it, but it was clear that a lot of planning had already been done,
Mhm.
and that it wasn't a meeting to solicit input from the community. It was kind of just giving us information,
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
seemed to be.
Mhm.
I was, and a lot of people expressed a lot of disappointment that that the school community, the students, the neighbors, teachers, had not been
Yeah.
informed.
Informed. But maybe Kathy, you could talk a little bit about what's special about Salemwood. What's the profile of maybe the school population? You've talked about the economic impact and types of things. Maybe you could talk about that.
So Salemwood is not only the largest school in Malden, I told you it runs between 1,200 and 1,400 students. We're also the school where all of the new English language learners attend. We're also the most economically disadvantaged school and district. So we are a high needs school. 82% of our population is high needs. And let's see if I can find the figures here. So 82% are high needs versus 63% of the district as a whole.
Mhm. Mhm. And high needs could it be
So
language, could it be
It's
economics?
language,
Could it
economics, and students with disabilities.
be, Mhm.
So we also have 70% of our students' first language is not English versus 50% of the district, 55% of the district.
So a lot of non-English speaking
Right.
is first language.
Right.
So as I recall back at that meeting, which we all attended, I recall that I actually only recall there was one parent from the school system, from that school, who attended, and she's here for the second half of this. But that's, the invitations really didn't go out in multiple languages or things like that,
No.
right? Now, in terms of the economic justice consideration, maybe you could talk a little bit about that in terms of the way the state interprets that, and in terms of projects of this scale.
Well, it's a policy, not only on a state level, but also on a federal level, where when projects such as this are supposed to include community outreach, not just to tell them about the project, but to include them actually in the planning and design stages. And it should have gone out in multiple languages. It should have, the outreach should have been done actually going to the residents, so, going to the actual neighborhoods and telling them about it. So that is what environmental justice is all about, is making sure that the people who are going to be most affected and who are the stakeholders, because it's their neighborhood, should have been included.
Has that happened since that meeting? Was it a few months ago?
No, nothing.
So nothing really has happened since then. Interesting.
I just want to mention too that, talking about environmental justice, so the Salemwood School and that area is considered environmental justice area. Malden has 5 artificial turf fields currently. 4 of those artificial turf fields are within a mile of Roosevelt. So if Roosevelt also becomes an artificial turf field, we're talking 5 out of 6 artificial turf fields condensed in one particular part of the city. And 2 of those fields are abutting public housing. And throughout the city, one of the things is about the lighting. And the fields that have the lighting actually abut public housing. And if you go to those fields at night, those houses, their homes are lit up, which are our students' homes, are lit up from those lights.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of inequity going on.
Yeah. Interesting, yeah. Maybe Kari can talk, we do have some prepared notes that we put together, just about the field itself, Kari, in terms of the 8 to 10 year lifespan and replacing it, and those, maybe you could talk about just the technology that goes into these fields and what some concerns might be.
Oh, sure. Well, first, if I got some visuals, because I'm kind of a visual person.
Yeah.
But first, I just want to talk about the some of the benefits of actual living grass. Living grass does several things that are services that, in addition to just being able to run around and kick a ball on them. One thing is that they actually take the light energy, they remove the light energy from the air and turn it into grass. That's what photosynthesis is. So they convert the light energy into more grass, and this cools the air because the light energy is being removed. They give off oxygen, so that cleans the air, so the children have oxygen to breathe when they're running around in the field. And it removes the carbon dioxide from the air because it uses it up to make the sugar. So the carbon dioxide is removed from the air, and that also cools the air because carbon dioxide traps heat. And finally, they the plants release cool water vapor to keep themselves cool, and that cools everybody. So living grass has advantages that make it really not only important for the whole neighborhood staying cool, like during one of those heat waves this summer in the urban setting, but also the hundreds of children playing on it benefit from the grass being alive. It's basic, like I'm a middle school science teacher, it's right in the textbook.
So photosynthesis, what grade level science is this?
Well, I taught middle school, I know they're teaching it lower than that too.
3rd to 5th.
Third to
That's
fifth.
what it starts,
So if you've been through 3rd to 5th grade, you kind of
This is like a basic.
you understand this.
Right.
Okay.
Other things that I found out just doing a little research around this is that the healthy soil microbes break down the bacteria that for anything, any grubby stuff on the field, and the roots absorb water and regenerate and make more grass. It's all good, right? Obvious, nice. So then why is the plastic turf so hot? I was wondering that when I did that little experiment with the thermometers, like why did it shoot up to 100 degrees on a 70-degree day? And if you want to hold this for, if you just compare these two, instead of the living grass, the living grass removes the light energy from the air, it binds it up chemically, but plastic turf, just that light energy hits it and then converts it into heat energy. So the air that's closest to the ground is the hottest, and who's the closest to the ground are short children. So I find it an incredibly inappropriate choice for a schoolyard, because the children are small, and when they walk on that hot plastic, the heat just goes right through your body, through your feet, and it gives you this sensation of like a fever, like even if it's only 70 degrees out in the air, you're getting that heat straight up through your feet through conduction. Other things people have talked about are the loose crumbs of the infill. Those are loose, and children can, roll in. It gets on their body. They can ingest it very easily. Little kids, again, I don't think it's a smart choice for small children. And another big one that was the bacteria thing. On the living grass, the healthy soil microbes break down the bacteria, but in plastic grass, there's nothing breaking that bacteria down, so they have to wash the grass with all these antibacterial chemicals. So for the children, it's not great to have this. It's and then for the whole neighborhood, it increases the urban heat island effect, and it raises the temperature of the whole neighborhood. So like during the heat waves this summer, when it got up into the 90s, if the artificial turf gets up to 100 degrees on a 70-degree day, it can get up to 150 degrees just on the surface. And this isn't just coming from me. The manufacturers of the turf have warning labels, and they've been working on trying to get the temperature down somehow, and they just put water on it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This isn't meant to be a trick question.
Sure.
But so living grass was what, 3rd to 5th grade is kind of when the typical lesson was. What about this lesson over here? When do students get that lesson in school?
Well, this is usually about albedo, which is like the temperature of different surfaces and what that does to the air. I'm not sure. I just taught middle school and high school, and I did middle school earth science and physics, and so we go through like convection, conduction, different forms of heat transfer.
Yeah.
So how the different forms of energy change when they go from one form to another.
Not 3rd to 5th grade though. Fair to say.
They might do a little bit then.
Yes, we do changing energy from one form to another.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like introduced and then it goes deeper. They spiral it, so it goes deeper. So
Well, that's good.
this isn't, this isn't rocket science. It's
Interesting. Yeah.
and it's palpable. You can really feel it. So even at the hearing with the city council, he spoke about. They asked him. I forget his name.
John.
Yeah. If he, if it is hotter, and he admitted that it is hotter. It's not.
So one of the things that we'll do for the viewers is, after this we'll do a write-up and we'll get it out there. And we'll include links to both Kari's, which did a wonderful blog post in terms of measuring the temperatures. Maybe we can use these graphics as well to include.
Sure.
And more on this heat island effect. In fact, you can, and we have done, you can look at aerial shots of this area of Malden, and you'll see, and they do heat gradients basically to show what the different temperatures are. Right. And it's very visible that the heat essentially just pools in this area next to these specific fields.
Yes, there was a good NPR article, and they said that there were people studying the heat island effect, or the heat island effect, and they were looking at these infrared photographs that measure the temperature, and they were seeing these big squares and they were lighting up, like really showing they were very hot, and they were like, what is that? Is that like a tar roof or a parking lot? Like, what is so hot? And they looked, and it was those artificial turf.
Yeah, turf fields.
So it's not only an impact on the children, which should be the first concern, the whole neighborhood would suffer during heat waves. And with climate change making the heat waves more frequent and more intense, and heat waves cause power outages, people lose their air conditioning, it's a real risk. It's a real life and death risk. So you can think, it's just some grass, we just want to play ball. But when you think about the responsibility of a city to its citizens, how can we make decisions that will be the right decision for our community's health? It's really about health infrastructure. Is keeping the live grass is actually health infrastructure for the whole neighborhood.
Yep. So before you guys introduce the parents who are going to join us to talk about exactly that, the children and their perspective, what else would you like to infuse into the discussion at this point in time, and then we can all come back at the end? What have we missed? What do we need to point out before the parents have a chance to talk about concerns for the children?
Kari we were talking about the lights, we had a discussion about the lights. Kari had done a little bit of research.
There's an organization called the International Dark Sky Association, and they have criteria for community-friendly outdoor sports lighting because they are committed to having less light pollution. When I used to live in Gloucester, I lived across from a Little League field, and the lights were just really bright right in my windows at night. And then then you have to shut the curtains, and then, well, what if you want to wake up and see your beautiful view, which is the whole reason you bought that house or why you picked that apartment, right? So this International Dark Sky Association has criteria for outdoor sports lighting that's community friendly, minimizing the lighting nuisance, the glare, the angle, there's different things you can do, the type of light, so they have a lot of good information on what kind of lights to choose, instead of just the brightest ones that burn everybody's retinas out when they're trying to sleep.
So now on that, at least from what I've heard in the discussions, people have never talked about the lights. It's almost as though the lights weren't there and they weren't a factor. But what you're saying is that that's a whole nother element. I have heard at least one person say, well, the beauty of the synthetic turf is that you can use it from 7 in the morning until 11 at night, which makes you wonder about the lights. Because it's a fairly densely populated area, right? So what you're saying is that there are organizations that provide guidance and information on that sort of thing? So we should be looking into that, in other words, we as a city of Malden.
Yes, definitely.
Cool. Maybe you want to introduce our next
So
guest?
we have a few parents here. We have Stefanie, Alberto, and Lilia. I'm going to struggle with your last name, but I'll let you introduce yourself. Haddouche. Yes. All right, so we'll have them come on.
Lilia and Stefanie, come on up. I'm going to use my Sharpie, they seem to be in fashion of late, to make sure that we check off all the things that we've done. And so Lilia and Stefanie, maybe you could start the same way that they did, just a little bit about your interests in this discussion and what brings you here. Maybe start with Stefanie.
Right, so my name is Stefanie Alberto. I've been a Malden resident for 6 years. My husband and I kind of happened upon this neighborhood when we were looking to buy a house, and we found a condo that we could afford here, and so we bought it, and over the last 6 years we've really come to like Malden. We've had 2 children in that time, and we love the people, we love the neighborhood. We really want to make this our home where we can raise our girls.
That's great, thanks.
Yeah, so my name is Lilia Haddouche. I live in Malden since 7 years now, and my daughter started kindergarten in Sullivan this year. So that's mainly why I'm concerned about this artificial turf, because my daughter will be playing on it daily with her friends. I'm concerned about all the children of Sullivan. Yeah.
And Lilia, I think you were at the Salem Wood Community Forum?
Yes.
And you spoke, as I recall.
Yes, I did, and I went before that to the CPC meeting, and that I had to leave because I just thought that was too pro-turf and for me, and they didn't really want to hear an opposite opinion. So yeah, I attended to many of the meetings, all the meetings that I heard of after I heard about this project on Facebook. Yeah.
So you heard about it on Facebook?
The first time I heard about it was on Facebook.
On Facebook, just from a friend or from
From a parent, a concerned parent.
From a concerned parent, okay.
Who sent an alert on Facebook.
And so you weren't at the meeting at Salem Wood, Stefanie, were you?
No.
Or, so you weren't, but you definitely were and you spoke.
Yeah.
Have you heard any follow-up since that meeting? So nobody reached out to contact you?
And I was expecting that because I think this meeting was just, just to say, okay, you had your community meeting, and that's it. I mean, they brought an engineer to explain. They just promoted the project, actually, and that's it. It wasn't. I was not expecting. I'm a very observative person, and I can tell from I can tell if really they had a will to change things or no. So I really didn't expect any follow-up, but we're not giving up, and we're continuing to fight.
And you're here tonight. And how did you come to be here tonight with Malden Talks? What was it, through Kathy or Kari? So through Kathy you knew.
Yeah.
Good. Have either of you reached out to any of the program's proposers or planners or?
I've written to Malden Youth Soccer. I've written to the CPC committee. I've written to our mayor, all of the counselors at large, my own ward counselor, the Ward 5 counselor, and any other
This
counselor,
person's engaged. This
any
is
other
a-
counselor who
yeah.
was on the finance committee.
Yeah.
And yes, and I feel I got the same impression from as Lilia that their minds are already made up, save one counselor.
So this is a loaded question, and I don't mean to ask questions that we don't know what the answers are to, but, so you've written to like everybody.
Yes.
You've pretty much reached out to everybody, and certainly Lilia made her presence very well known
Mhm.
at the meeting. What have you heard back, Stefanie?
Pretty much the same thing as Lilia. They, when I bring up my concerns, I'm redirected to, we think that this is a good project for, one counselor said that, that because, that this is that the Salemwood School serves the most economically disadvantaged students in our neighborhood, and they shouldn't have the worst field, is what one person said. I don't.
So, sorry, no, okay.
I don't. If there are flooding issues, I feel like we should fix those. But I don't look at this field and think that this is the worst field. I look at this field and I see a nice place to run around.
So you're not buying it?
No.
Lilia, what?
Yeah, I just think that for me, like it's another question to be asked. I mean, if I think they're trying to mainly replacing life by life, isn't it?
Mhm.
Oxygen by toxic fumes,
Mhm. Mhm.
fresh air by extreme heat, health by good health by cancerogens and endocrine disturbers. And they're expecting me to just approve the project and
Mhm.
just, it's not possible. For me, it's
Mhm.
like a nightmare, and I need to keep fighting
Mhm.
until I have a responsibility for my child,
Mhm.
for all the other children of Salemwood. And if I am the only person or only parent or two or three, I will talk till the end. I will not give up.
Mhm. Do you, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I feel the same. So I'm actually a resident of Ward 6, Precinct 2. The closest school to my house is Salemwood, and I imagine that my girls will go there. Ward 6, Precinct 2 has 0 acres of natural green public space. Where the school sits is Ward 5, Precinct 1, and this is the only green space in that entire precinct. So if they take this away, they're taking away 100% of the natural green space in Ward 5, Precinct 1, and that for me and my family, that represents all
Two
of
precincts split
Yes.
across two wards.
Right.
It's, yeah, and it's, yeah, once it's gone, it's tough to get it back.
And I need to add is that we're here to talk because this is being done on a schoolyard. I mean, if it was just a separate soccer field, maybe we won't have this all these meetings, but this is a schoolyard, this is a play space for children, daily children. We're not talking only about soccer, because the soccer team will be there for what, like twice a week for 90 minutes? My child will be there every day during recess. So it's a play space that we are fighting for. It's not just a soccer field.
I actually think it's great you brought that up, because, and Kathy earlier had mentioned how the number of synthetic turf fields within the mile radius, but this actually citywide is the only synthetic turf field that's attached to an elementary school, right? Now, there is the charter school, which has a kindergarten associated with it, but that's all. But all the other synthetic turf fields are like McDonald Stadium or Howard Park, or they're either geared towards more adult-aged or older people, but they're not attached to a school, which is a playground
Right.
yeah.
Yes.
They're not used as playgrounds elsewhere in the city.
No.
Also, we know about turf fields now more than we knew in the last
Yep.
years. So
Yep.
we know that it has very bad health effects. Even though they say that it's not proven, but even cigarette is not banned. They know that it causes cancer, but they cannot ban it.
Yeah.
And it's still, and there is no definite studies about this. So we know the synthetic turf is being banned in some countries, and synthetic turf is failing right now. They said that it costs like 4 to 5 times more money to build a synthetic turf. So the argument was that it's maintenance free, but it's just lasting for 10 to 15 years. And some, I don't remember, I posted on Facebook an article in which state or which town they are failing after 7 years. And it's a lot of money too, though. Sometimes they're removing the whole. Okay, so you're not gaining. At the long term, it's being the same. You're just replacing. So there is no financial benefit.
So you're not buying it?
No.
It's a financial win and it's gonna last
No,
forever? and-
yeah,
yeah,
no.
yeah.
Yeah,
Not
and
buying it.
after a few years, all these crumbs, or there will be like powder and
Mhm.
damaged, and I mean, you don't want your kids to play on that.
So one last question, and anything that you'd like to add, and then maybe Kathy and Kari can come on back up and we can kind of have just a discussion and wrap up. But do you folks know what the status of the project is today? Or
No.
what the next steps are tomorrow? Or do you have a sense of where it's at or what's happening?
I have no.
No, but I feel that I would know more of the plan of Ridge Park or Devier than I would know about Roosevelt, because there is a very good outreach when it's the west end part of Malden, or than it is when it's Sellenwood neighborhood. So I think I'm gonna hear a lot of things about the renovation and the plan of the Ridge Park than I would hear about Roosevelt, which is like, I want to understand why, but.
So if I can use this to make a public service announcement for Ridge Park, actually today, because there is actually a Community Preservation Committee proposal in for Ridge Park, which I personally had a hand in. And literally today, I had interactions with the school superintendent, the director of athletics, multiple counselors, multiple residents, and oh, by the way, hopefully, because it involves the improvement renovation of the tennis courts, hopefully also the students on the tennis team. So really an outreach effort to involve the community, because in fact, they're the stakeholders, and in some sense, it is used by a wide range of ages and people, and quite heavily. And so really they ought to have a really big say in that. So that's okay. So but other than that, so you don't really know what the status is, if they're going to start excavating tomorrow or next month or next year at this point. Okay. What else? Anything else in general before Kathy and Kari join us again?
Right. Oh. Okay. So I'm opposed to the artificial turf because of all the environmental disaster that it is, but also I feel like one idea that I put out there a lot, that I feel like gets scoffed at a lot, is the kids' access to nature, right? I feel like humans, children included, need access to nature for our mental well-being, just for our physical health, and when we take that for granted for some of our children and take that away for other children, I think that that's a real problem. And I think that we as a society need to look at that and look at how we make decisions, so that every resident of Malden and every child gets to have some access to nature.
And when you moved to Malden, you had that at Salem Wood, and you have that today at
Yes.
Salem Wood. And so if that were to be changed, it literally would be taking,
Right, I'm not
That way.
exaggerating when I say that as a resident of Ward 6 Precinct 2, I am surrounded by concrete and plastic grass. I'm not even exaggerating. The yard area that's in behind my house is asphalt. I live in a triple decker and there's several other triple deckers on my block on the corner, and I can see all their yards, and a lot of us don't even have yards. There's not a place for their kids to play, so I'm fortunate that I have a space where my children can run around, throw a ball, and write with some chalk. A lot of kids don't have that, and so the only nature that we would have within walking distance is this park.
Salem Wood. Lilia, you get to wrap up, and then maybe
Yes,
Kathy and Kari can join
I
us.
just need to add something about from the environmental aspect and how Malden is dealing with that. So I just want to say that I really felt like the global warming is the least of their concerns in regards of this project, and I just want to say that global warming is today's biggest issue, and we don't have a lot of time left for us to react. And so we mess too much with nature, and nature is fighting back. It's taking its revenge. And it saddens me most that the Community Preservation Committee helped and supported this project. And what saddened me more is when I read that the CPC funds could have been used to replace playground equipment and do other capital improvement. I'm reading, this is from the website. And used to replace playground equipment and do other capital improvements to the land or the facilities thereon to make them more functional for their intended recreational use. So my understanding is CPC could have realized Salem Wood kids' dream of having swings, handicapped accessible playground, improve the state of the grass field, but they chose to support an artificial turf project. That's my last word.
That's a pretty powerful last word to end on, and maybe Kari and Kathy can join us. And I think it'd be great to figure out. Bingo, we're all back. So Kathy, lead us off and finish us up.
Just one other thing I wanted to mention, at the end of the year, the kids actually took it upon themselves after learning what was gonna happen with the park from the health teacher. And they took it upon themselves to do a petition, and they went around the school, and they have 108 7th and 8th grade students that signed the petition, and also 88 the staff member, of which 38 of those signatures are actually Malden residents. So there's a lot of people who don't want this turf. The renovation, that's great, but not the turf.
And I just wanted to add that people are waiting for this EPA study to come out on the effects of crumb rubber, their toxicity. And the study came out, but only the first part of the study. And so we're still waiting on the second part. The first part of the study said the exposure was minimal, but we're waiting for the second part of the study to say, will that minimal exposure, how damaging is that? So they're not done yet. But what also has come out is from UMass Lowell, there is the Toxics Use Reduction Institute. They came out with a report that identified organically managed natural grass as a safer choice for athletic surfaces. So the science points to natural, real, living grass as being a much better choice for young bodies growing.
Yeah, I hope by that a lot of residents will join us in our fight. I mean, we're fighting for kids, for children. I mean, it's, I mean, for the health of everybody. It's just, everybody needs to join us, and we don't need more plastic, we just need more nature. And we're ruining our health, we're ruining our children's health. They're developing brains. I mean, we're not healthy as we were before, because we've been challenging nature, and we shouldn't do that. So, I'm just, whoever sees this video, we're seeking their help. And this is election year, so we can make things change, and we can vote for the right people. People who really, we're in 2019, we cannot think as, there are studies coming up and facts coming up, and we know more things today than we knew 10 years before. So we cannot, if our leaders of now don't understand us, we need to have new leaders. And this is an election year, so let's do proactive and change things.
I want to second that point. It's so important for us to be involved. So please call or write your city councilors, the mayor, the U.S. Senator Ed Markey, who's a author of the Green New Deal, and also our state senator Lewis.
So it's been a pretty powerful night, I would say. We've covered a lot of ground. I mean, here it is, a Friday night, and Joe and family, they've been good to offer their studio up for this with Malden Talks. But Kathy, Kari, Lilia, and Stefanie, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for investing this energy. And I think a lot of people are going to see this. We just put it out there, and Joe is behind the camera, and Joe may have something else to add. But Malden Talks is open to sort of the other side of the argument, right? Which is, we know that there are stakeholders, we know that there are people who have been the other side of the coin, so to speak. And the invitation is out there. The casting call was fortunate to bring in this crew tonight, but there's another meeting out there in the future to do the same thing with another agenda. In the meantime, we'll post this and with additional information. And Joe from behind the camera, Malden Talks, you want to close it out for us?
Just one quick note. We're trying to organize a Halloween event on Trafton Park, October 26th, the afternoon. As far as we know, it's never been done before. We're going to try and do it on the park itself. So if you know anybody, bring your children. If they have a high tolerance for candy, bring them along. It'll be fun.
October 26th at Trafton Park. Maybe we'll see you there. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Joe and Malden Talks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.